Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. Well, today is a dramatic departure from our normal format of the podcast. That's because today my friend Cara Stewart will host the show as she interviews me as a guest on my own podcast. You know, initially I invited Cara to be a guest on the show, but after she and I discussed a possible topic, she came up with a question. Hey, Charlie, has anyone ever interviewed you on your show? And my response was, well, not really. And after a few moments of thought, I told her, Cara, let's give it a shot. So here we are. Fortunately now, Cara Stewart is an excellent host. She is a former journalist, a frequent co-host of another podcast on OC Talk Radio, a serial entrepreneur, and I mean serial, to the tune of like 30 or something.
Been involved with 30 startups, yes.
30 startups, and she's 12 years old. I don't get it. And the founder and CEO of a really brilliant new company called Altalunas Media. Now, I have no idea what to expect, so I am most interested in what Cara has in mind. And with that, I think we should just bring on Cara Stewart as the host of today's Next Chapter with Charlie. Cara, welcome to the Next Chapter with Charlie.
Charlie, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for being so open to doing something different.
Yeah. I like. Open is one word. I like different. I do like different.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm ready for different, and I've taken off my reading glasses and I just have my thinking mind on. So
we're getting serious here. No, I think that was a good way of introducing this too, because you were so kind to invite me back to your show. This would have been the second time to interview me. And while I'm always grateful for that, in talking about what we could talk about on this show, you offered such amazing insight, and I was so intrigued by our conversation, I thought others would want to know what you shared with me. So let's talk a little bit about you. Which episode is this? How many episodes have you done?
This will be 240. Can you believe that?
240.
Yeah.
So I know your listeners have been able to get to know you along the way through your own interviewing, and you're a prolific writer as well, and through that journey that you've been able to share. But I bet a lot of times people don't even know about your own journey and the impetus for this, and your really love of change is what I've always been able to glean from you. Walk us through that. You decided to start this podcast and this whole, as you embarked on your own next chapter. And something I read, you said that, yes, you're looking forward to the discretionary time and determining about how to manage that time and what you're going to do. And that's what this change would be about. But also that you're really a lover of change and its opportunity to present unlimited opportunities.
Thank you. Yeah, I like change. I have a resistance to change itself because sometimes change feels inadequate when it's change just for the sake of change. I'm bored and I want to do something different. Now, that is very true of me. I am bored and do something different. I don't know that I've ever had a career that's more than a decade long. So I've probably had 6 or 8 careers in my lifetime.
What were those careers, real quick?
I started off it wasn't a career, but my first job was a real job. When I was 15 years old, I had a real job. I wasn't working at Dairy Queen. I was working at a chemical factory.
Wow.
And I was working at a chemical factory with men that were 30 to 50 years old, and I was the high school kid they all thought was 16 because you had to be 16 to get a job in California at the time, and I made 50 cents above minimum wage, so I made $2 an hour.
Wow.
Minimum wage was $1.50, so that tells you it was a ways back. And I can tell you an experience with that was really interesting. They gave the kid all the crappy jobs and the dangerous jobs that they wouldn't give anyone else, and there was no such thing as OSHA, so we had no governmental protection of safety and health, and we made this chemical ingredient called sulfuric nickel sulfide, and it was made with nickel and sulfuric acid, and it would be in a tank that was approximately 8 feet long, 2 feet wide, and about 4.5 feet deep. It was a sludge that had an agitator, and it had to be agitated or else it would solidify. The
sounds
chemicals.
rather dangerous.
Well, especially since the agitator broke and it solidified, and it wasn't that deep, and it was less than knee deep. So what they asked me to do was to get inside the tank with a shovel and shovel this sludge out of sulfuric acid and nickel, and there was so much internal heat in this chemical compound that I had to put water in my rubber boots. So I would put water in my rubber boots, get in and clean this out until my boots got too hot, get out, put new water in there, and go in and did it. And it was really funny. I had a handful of scars on my arm, just little scars of acid on your...
Just a few little scars of acid, But it builds character.
You're 16 years old, you're working with men, you think this is part of what a man's job is.
Sure. Was the extra 50 cents an hour for hazard pay?
No, that was extra. That was beer money.
That was beer money.
Beer money at 15 years old. and I had my mom wash my jeans. They fell apart.
I bet.
There was nothing left. So that was my first job, and then I had a couple of jobs in college. Although I had a scholarship, I had a couple of jobs in college. My first real job is I worked in the carpet industry. And we were in the application of color, and somebody else would weave the carpet, we would apply the color. I started at basically one level above janitor, and within 10 years I was general manager. I had everything to do with the application of color. I started working the grunt jobs and then moved up to styling and design, and then moved into production and was lead producer, and as a result became in charge. And so
is that where you learned the value of seizing opportunity and that present within change is that idea of abundant opportunities?
I wish I could say I was that sophisticated, but that was in the 70s.
There were other things at play there?
Well, I went to college on a gymnastics scholarship. I went to UCLA on a gymnastics scholarship, and which covered, tuition, fees, all of that sort of thing. But it was in the 60s. It was in the late 60s, and UCLA was the heart of Hippieville in Southern California. And so me being sort of having a proclivity for change, I've been accused of having, by a conservative individual at a seminary that I went to later, called me, "Charlie, you have a proclivity for the novel."
Proclivity for the novel.
Yeah.
What a fantastic
fantastic
statement. He probably meant it as a caution, but I can see your face is lighting up right now, and I can see how proud you are that he noticed that in you.
Yeah, it was a derogatory comment that I took with such pride, and just said, it is so true, because it was a Baptist seminary and I graduated Presbyterian. So because I didn't, and partially Catholic because I didn't adopt the Baptist theology. But anyway, so I raised myself up in that career. I then came into, I had a visitation from the Christ at 30 years old, and I was reading the Bible to disprove it. And to a friend, I was dating a Christian friend I was in California, she was in Dalton, Georgia, and I said, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll read your book and I'll show you that you're wrong. And I read the book, and I had a visitation from the Spirit of God and of Christ to say, Charlie, excuse me, this is not bullshit. This is the real thing. And it was through that encounter with the Christ that no one preached to me. Nobody asked me to accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior. None of that sort of thing happened. I was in. And the beauty of that story, Cara, is that I didn't this happened at 30 years old. Mm-hmm. I didn't become a Christian at 30 years old. I realized my whole life had been part of a journey with God, and that God was leading me not to salvation as much as he was leading me to recognition of his work in my life, my whole life. So I have to preach that to people, that just because you're acknowledging it or not acknowledging it, it's just an awareness of an ongoing truth that has been a truth since you've been born, because there is a creator of the universe that's very nature, very makeup is love. So I was a preacher for about 7 or 8 years, and I discovered, and it was of a large church. I was one of the ministers. I wasn't the lead minister. There was about 15,000 people.
Where was this? Was this in Georgia?
Nope, Newport Beach.
Newport Beach.
It was called South Coast Community Church. It's very well known today as Mariners Church.
Of course.
It's a very large church, and I was one of the founding pastors of it. After I attended seminary for 3 years and studied Greek and Hebrew, the Greek New Testament and the Hebrew Old Testament, and received my master's degrees in those.
Would it be fair to say, it seems like the pattern is emerging from what you're sharing, would it be fair to say that when you develop an interest in something, you commit to it? It seems like you've had these experiences, and for example, being in this carpet company, and within 10 years you went from essentially being janitor to GM, and then you had this your visitation of Christ's Spirit after, as you said, trying to disprove the presence of such to a woman you were dating, and then that pivoted and you went down the pathway to learn as much as you can. Is that part of your DNA, being able to commit to something and really going down that path to learn and explore and then teach it?
Cara, as reflective as I am, I don't know that I've ever reflected on that, but that is common with me, is that I don't buy in easily. I may buy in easily. I'm kind of gullible, and I've got this bleeding heart, and I will get involved. And
Still shaped by your UCLA of the late 60s, I see.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about things, but some things really hit home. And when they hit home, I get deeply involved. I was deeply involved in the church, deeply involved in carpet industry, deeply involved in what I'm sure we'll talk about later, my current spiritual journey, and with the charity that I work with, Wells of Life. I met them in March of 2017. By August, I was a trustee in Uganda, and by October, I was a vice president. I was a vice president on the board, soon to become, which I still am today, vice president of operations in Uganda. So, yes, I get into something, and I go in wholehearted.
So you're not only the lover of change, though, it sounds like you become a lover of being fully immersed in that situation and not holding back from being able to experience it. How do you, since this show is really about the next chapter, how do you decide what kind of opportunities you're going to pursue? There's a twofold question with this, because this is what kicked off our initial conversation the other day, Charlie, was that you, if I may, reflected to me that you took a little bit of time off, or at least paused the beginning of this year, because you were starting to feel a little bit of signs of burnout, or perhaps a little bit less excited about things. And I asked you your process for pulling that back and making sure that you did not allow the symptoms of burnout to deviate you from this joy that you're experiencing on this path.
Thank you. That's a wonderful observation. Great recall of our conversation. I think the answer is twofold. The first answer is, now that I'm 72, I don't do as much life planning as I used to, because I was in that highly productive stage where life planning was really critical. Now I still plan life, but not to the intent that I did. Is
that part of having more discretionary time, though, being semi-retired?
I think it has to do with a bit more becoming wise.
Okay.
Understanding more of my DNA, my nature, my personality, what's important to me in life. One thing that I did, we had a show sometime back on noble aims. And I have identified 5 noble aims in my life. If I am not doing something actively to live according to those noble aims, I'm amiss. And my noble aims are simple. One is family. And I have an extended family that I love, that I care for, but my family is my wife and my son Austin and his wife Maggie. I mean, those are the very top 2 most important things in my life, is taking care of my family.
And you talk about them a lot and with such pride.
And love, and it's pride not in their accomplishments as much, because they're all 3 highly accomplished, but it's the joy that they get from their accomplishments. It's a joy that they get in their job, and that they're not out there just trying to make a buck. And and they all are reasonably successful financially. My son is extraordinarily successful financially, because
baseball player,
professional baseball players, no matter how good you are or not so good, you still make a lot of money.
Thank you, Players Union, right?
Thank you, Players Union, which my son was union rep. So in the last negotiations. So I have my family, and these are not necessarily in order of priority except the first 2, and that's my spiritual life. As my listeners know, I have a very dedicated, disciplined morning and evening ritual, which my morning begins with meditation that I use. I'm a big advocate. I would tell everybody of Andy Puddicombe's Headspace. I meditate 20 minutes every day. I just looked up. I didn't even know they had it available, how much you've meditated. I've meditated now with Andy 500 hours. Wow. And that works at 20 minutes a day. That's 1,500 days of meditation with Andy Puddicombe. And then I read spiritual reading, and I journal for another 20 to 30 minutes. And then I go into my prayer room. Since I'm not Catholic, I'm very Catholic persuaded, but I'm not limited by Catholic doctrine, or Catholic dogma. So I can give myself communion. So I take communion every day, and then I have a candlelit just before I go to bed. I have a candlelit prayer ceremony at night that I do. So my spiritual,
you bookend your days.
Yes, I bookend my days, and it's very helpful. So
what happens on days that you do not practice this?
Like today, you mean?
Yes.
I think because I practice it so frequently, I don't miss it. For a day, I can miss a day because I have right now over 120 days of consecutive meditating. So I meditate every day. I make sure I don't not meditate. But my journaling and my prayer did not happen today. I'm okay, but if I go 2, 3, 4 days, there's something, life just gets amiss. The hecticness, the craziness, the busyness become overwhelming. In my journey toward mysticism, solitude and contemplation are huge. I must be able to sit alone and quiet and contemplate.
And I do want to leave time to talk about what you might be your next book as well, which seems like it's another journey on your spiritual path. But I want to make sure your noble aims, you said the first 2 are family and spiritual.
And the next 2 I can list pretty quickly. One is Wells of Life, where we, this year, Cara, we will have drilled our 1,000th well, which means we will have given 1 million people access to clean water in Uganda. 1 million people that were drinking dirty water. You wouldn't even put your hand in the water. It is so dirty. And so we've given clean water.
What does that mean to those villagers or to the people? How does life change with them? Because I'm thinking about, we hear, if I may ask a controversial question around that, why Uganda? We still have Flint, Michigan here that doesn't have clean water.
It's that our founder It's a story where he founded a church there, or not a church, I'm sorry, a school. He underwrote the building of a school, and in the process of the building of the school, he saw somebody doing a water pump, and he realized water is the answer. Water is the root of poverty. It's the first level of poverty. The illness, the cholera, the diarrhea, the dysentery, are all just horrible. And so people are sick all the time. And after getting clean water, and we teach them sanitation and hygiene, we have a whole year-long, 9-month process that gets followed up for 3 years, but it gets extreme follow-up for a year, that they almost have no hospital visits due to dysentery or diarrhea, and no stunted growth. It's reduced infant mortality by 50%.
50% because of the access to water and hygiene and sanitation around it.
Because they were eating contaminated, drinking or being fed with contaminated food or contaminated water, which caused, babies don't do well with diarrhea and dysentery. 20% of babies under 5 will die of waterborne disease, and in international countries. Now, I feel very inclined to help in the United States, but my dollar in the United States goes about 10% as far as it does as the number of people I can serve. For $1 million, for a million wells, which at 8,000 a well is 800,000. $8 million.
$8 million.
$8 million.
Look at us, two creatives here doing math.
Yeah, I know. I always mess up on my zeros.
But you're able to extend the impact of your giving, and this organization is to be able to extend the impact of its infrastructure because the dollar goes so much further. And so many more people are being able to help, and there's this ripple effect now. So it's not just about that at the individual pump. It's about the societies being able to mature and build infrastructure and lean into things that we take for granted here. Infant mortality rate. Precisely.
We are at most levels of our society, we're a very entitled society. We think they are not entitled. They don't expect any help. So they pray for help. They pray for water wells. They know they're called boreholes there. That's the sort of the engineering term for it.
Okay.
They are praying for boreholes, but knowing the likelihood of getting them is so remote. So when they get a borehole and we commission a village, we will have anywhere from 50 to 200 people celebrate that they have water. I know we're not supposed to use first and second and third world, but it helps. There's the developing world, but
yes,
third world countries do not have anywhere near all of the physical accoutrements and they don't have cars and their clothes are ragged. They don't have enough food. They don't have TV. They don't have water. They don't have all sorts of things. They don't feel entitled to any of that. And yet, they are without a doubt much happier people than we are. They do not have suicide rates like we have. They do not have the depressive cycles that we have. They do not have all of the mental disabilities that we have due to feeling neglected. And so
what do you think it is? Is all of this emanate from a source of feeling neglected? You're certainly a student of spiritualism, of leadership. You synthesize life lessons from others.
I would be reluctant to say that because I'm not expert in that.
But but from your own...
Yeah, from my experience, yes. There is no future thinking. Today is the future. Every day, they don't even think about tomorrow. Tomorrow Tomorrow doesn't exist because I've got a life that I have to live today. I've got to try to put food on the table. I've got to have clean dishes. I've got to hopefully I have
clean water.
Yeah. And so it truly is one day at a time. They're not thinking so future, and we are thinking so future oriented, and there's so much comparative. We're comparing ourselves with another, keeping up with the Joneses, or just not.
Which is an epidemic that we've talked about here in America.
It's terrible. It's terrible. So the joy, I just went to Africa in February. I'm going back again in July, and I love because I work with the leadership team, so I'm sort of the strategic thinker of the company. So I will work on strategies, but we always get me into the field where we have 18 employees. I'm working with our staff. I get out to the villages and see the villagers, and it's just so heartwarming. So that's one.
That's Wells of Life, correct?
That's Wells of Life.
That makes up your third noble aim in your life.
And by the way, just to let everybody know, a little marketing, wellsoflife.org. We can always use anybody that would like to donate or become involved as a volunteer. We have plenty for you to do. And the other one is what we're doing right now is the next chapter. A lot of people that do podcasts, my podcast heroes like Krista Tippett on Being. I think she's the goddess of podcasts, that she is so good at it. But, she has a team of a dozen or more people, and they spend, that's all they do is a podcast. Well,
full-time team.
I'm not at that position, so
this is a labor of love for you.
I spend about a full day a week doing a podcast and a blog. It will take me about 4 to 6 hours to prepare for a podcast, and 3 to 4 hours to write a blog. That's one of my noble aims. And the last one I just added, Cara. It's new. I had 4 noble aims for forever, and I added this 5th one, which is call it satiation of curiosity.
Satiation of curiosity.
I am so curious. I want to find new things. It's my proclivity for the novel. I love studying new things. That's why I love travel, where I go to Uganda 2 to 3 times a year. I go overseas once, sometimes twice. As a matter of fact, in a week and a half, I will be in Portugal for 3 weeks. And it's just hanging.
Immersing yourself in the culture.
I've done enough sightseeing. I'm a terrible tourist. My wife and I, one time we laughed, we went to the Grand Canyon, and my wife is very similar with me, and so we pulled off to see the Grand Canyon, and we, my goodness, we stood there for about 5 minutes and said, big hole. Yep. Pretty cool, isn't it?
I think my father and I had that same exchange when I took him to the Grand Canyon. He actually had wanted to see it his entire life and had not made it. My father will be 86 this year, and about 3 years ago I took him. A little bit longer than that. We had the fantastic train ride, everything he wanted to do. And he slapped his hands together, said, "Well, sis," that's what he calls me. "Well, sis, that's a big hole in the ground. Ready to go home? This you've wanted to do this all your life, Dad. We're staying. I planned 3 or 4 days here. What are we going to do for 3 or 4 days?"
Truly.
So it sounds like he's of your same ilk.
Truly, in the very early in 1970, actually, I hiked the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
Now that was
a little bit different.
That was
experience.
A magnificent experience, is hiking from the north end to the south end, or vice versa. I think it was north to south.
So let's go back to your 4th aim, which is this show and your blog writing and your journey there. Is preparing my notes for your show today. You talk about that you're a proud baby boomer. And while the show is not necessarily only for baby boomers, there's certain life transitions that one starts to think about, namely perhaps retirement, of, maybe the empty nester syndrome, what's going to be the next generation legacy you're living. But I love that you also point out that the consideration of life changes is not just about retirement or for boomers. It's something that applies to all ages, all people, all walks of life. It's something we all have in common. Is that a belief you always held, or is this something that you've been able to develop by interviewing these guests for, almost 300 shows now?
It was the result of experience, is that I changed. I went from hippie to employee, and still, a lot of hippiedom running through me, working in the carpet industry, working in ministry, then working in professional with large corporations in consulting, executive coaching, and now where I'm at, where I do a combination of all of those things. I saw that my life was a series of next chapters, and that every day is the next chapter. Cara, do you listen to Tim Ferriss ever?
I do, yes.
You know how he has this popular phrase at the end of the show, if you had a billboard, what would you put on the billboard? How he says that. I know exactly. I heard him ask Tom Morello. I don't know if you don't know Tom Morello. He's the lead guitar player for Rage Against the Machine.
Absolutely.
I love alternative music. I love all music.
I think that's actually one of the things you and I first bonded on was there was a song being played at the old Center Club, and we talked about it, and I was surprised at your deep bench of knowledge into alternative music. Yeah. So sorry, I'm Gen X, and I was being a generationist about that, and didn't think that that music would resonate with you.
Yeah, how many 72-year-olds are Rage Against the Machine fans?
I'm sure Rage is very proud of that, though.
Yeah, Tom Morello is. Well, now, what was I saying about Tom?
That Tim Ferriss interviewed him and his classic billboard question.
Oh, the classic billboard question. He had his, which I can't remember, but I know mine, that I heard it in I would say about 83 or 84. And the statement is this: you are who you have been becoming. Mm. That is my life statement.
Say that one more time.
You are who you have been becoming. So whatever I am today is who I will be tomorrow. So that is my next chapter. I make a difference tomorrow by changing myself today. I can't wait for tomorrow to change it, because it's a forever procrastination project. Mm-hmm. Instead, I must be making the adjustments, what I need to do today. Will I be happy tomorrow doing what I did today? Will I feel content and fulfilled? And if not, I need to change what I'm doing today. So I love that phrase, you are who you have been becoming. And that's true. You look at your past and look at you. I mean, mm-hmm. Look at your multi-career as a journalist, as an entrepreneurialist, and I know there's so many other things. You have been becoming. You didn't just all of a sudden become a successful entrepreneur.
No.
It was step by step by step, a process of you becoming the Cara Stewart that you are today.
Thank you for that. I also say, though, that on that journey of becoming, a lot of what shapes me is what I jokingly say is getting my teeth kicked in, is learning from all of the negative things that have happened. Some have been because of my own missteps, and others have been simply external functions. Do you think that you've also learned, and that process has been through some of the challenges or darker periods of your life?
Cara, you're talking to a manic depressive.
I was trying to get you into be able to share whatever it is you wanted to share from that. And we also talked about being a recovering alcoholic and the journey that you walk with that every day. And you gave me some great advice about that really applies to everyone the other day, about how you use some of those techniques also to deal with this emerging perhaps sense of burnout that you were worried you were going to be experiencing.
Yeah, those are interrelated but a little bit separate subjects. But I did learn. I had 12 years of sobriety because I had hepatitis C, and after I that went into remission after 2 different interventions. The first intervention didn't really work, and so the second intervention did. And my internist told me, well, you've got 2 choices about drinking because it's a liver disease, right? And he says, you can keep drinking and die, or you can stop drinking and live. And I had a 7-year-old son, and so that was too important to me. Remember, family is so important in my life.
Your first higher aim,
and
noble aim.
Yes, mm-hmm. And so I quit drinking. Then 12 years later, I was really a successful non-drinker, never going to AA, never doing anything. I just decided not to do it. I started getting with a group of guys. We started playing hearts on Sunday nights. And they said, a glass of wine won't hurt, a glass of wine won't hurt. That's where, even though I knew I was an addict, even though I knew I was an alcoholic, and it just led to nothing but troubles. I got myself into legal trouble. I made a recovery. I, attended AA meetings. This is not going to bode well with alcoholics, because in the meetings, they're very determined that it is a community decision. It is a community aspect that we support one another, but it's also very personal, deep, and understanding your issues. God has gifted me with, when I make a decision not to do something, I don't do it. When I went to my Baptist seminary, I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And I realized Baptist and smoking,
strange bedfellows.
Yeah, they're intolerable bedfellows. And so I quit one day. I just quit smoking. I said, I can't go to this seminary and smoke. So I decided I quit smoking. And then once after I had, it's the first time I've ever said on air, but my second DUI in a 2-week period, I just said, I can't drink. Not to say that AA did not help. AA was incredible. I would recommend it to anybody. It's a magnificent organization that helps recovery. So they did do a lot of help. But the core thing was just deciding and living up to it. Now, I've had friends that say, Charlie, you are unusual. You decide to do something or not to do something, and you do it. And
mm-hmm.
That's a DNA thing. That's a gift of God. That is, I would not prescribe that to anybody. It's just...
Well, others simply couldn't do it. I think that's when a sense of frustration comes in when so many people, especially, you're sharing, I have ADHD, and being able to make a decision about something sometimes is impossible. Even if my desire is there, if I'm not managing my ADHD, the executive functioning skills become poorer and poorer, and I can't. So you do have a remarkable ability in that it sounds like you've been able to, once make a decision, adopt that decision. What I heard also is not only the elegance you have in starting the next chapter, but in exiting the last chapter.
Oh, great observation. Yes, part of my beginning a new chapter is I know that I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I just know I put everything I've into it because I'm not a maintainer. I'm a creator. As soon as it hits the maintaining phase, I get boring. I get boring, but I get bored.
Probably one and the same, though.
Yeah. I like to compare myself to a quarterback that very few people want to have. I will get you from kickoff to the red zone. I'll get you to the 20-yard line, but you need to put somebody else to score the touchdown because I feel like I've done my job. I've got you there. Get somebody else to do it.
Is it about someone else pulling up their own bootstraps, or is it just that you?
It's just that I'm done.
You're just done.
I'm just done. It's just time for me to, let's go to another kickoff, kick it off, and let me take it 80 yards down the field or 60 yards down the field. That has to do with that. Now, there was something we talked about burnout that Lindsay Davis and I talked last week, I think, on one of my better podcasts on detachment. And you were asking me, how do you detach?
Yes.
I think that
if we could just recap that real quick, we were talking about you felt burnout, or was leading toward burnout, and that you have a remarkable ability to detach, and that's how you have been choosing to manage it. And so, talk about what detachment really means, and tell us more about what Leslie said for those who didn't hear that fantastic episode. Really, really listen to it. It truly is one of Charlie's most incredible interviews.
Yeah, Lindsay.
Apologies.
Yeah, but yes, she is. She's awesome. She's one of my replenishing friends. That every time we talk, she replenishes me. I feel better. You know, we talked all around it. It's one of those, a fond word that the mystics use that I'm becoming fond of, is ineffable, and that is God. And so many different important elements of life are ineffable. That means they can't be put into words. We know their truth. They hit our souls, they hit our guts as truth. We know the truth of them, but as soon as you try to explain it, you fail. You know how many things that you know in your gut, you know this, and then when you try to feel it, you listen to what you just said, and you ask the question that I'm fond of asking, did I make any sense? And sometimes people say no, and I say, I know. I just can't. But I think I've come up with something that makes a bit sense, in that I had a therapist 20, 30 years ago, and he said that I had the capability and I needed to use this capability, and he called it's psychologically called schizoid. Now, schizoid is a very dangerous disorder. That means you cannot make relationships, cannot live in relationships. You're very singular-minded, very alone, and it can lead to schizophrenia. But this is a different, I call this a distant cousin to schizoid, in which, in a conversation, Cara, that I'm having, that's a deep emotional discussion, and detachment is being able to detach from the emotions of the discussion. You can stay deeply caring, deeply involved, but when they walk out of the office, or you walk out of their home, you close the door and it's done. It's over. You know, it's just, you've never been sucked in, because that's what we get. We get sucked into the emotion of it. So the schizoid part of it is, I like to view myself as an observer of my own conversation. And that is, when I am in the midst of extreme emotion, I don't do this with every single conversation, but when I'm into dangerous, where I run the danger of becoming emotionally attached, as soon as I'm emotionally attached, I'm no good. As soon as I'm with you in your pain, then I'm no good. I'm just, I'm exacerbating your pain. I can't view it as an outsider. If I view it at the same time of being a participant and an observer, I can serve you. Now I can observe, I can serve you, and I can walk away, and I can still be of service, and I don't have this pain, I can't sleep, or what's his name is going through this and the trouble. Just say, that's just their life, and I take it as it is and move on. So I think detachment is the ability to become, in a personal relationship, is to become somewhat of an observer, while at the same time you are observing your participation. You're observing how you're serving. You're seeing how you're serving. You're focusing on your serving. Your intent is on serving, but it is not to the degree that you are emotionally involved.
So being able to, in effect, take that, put it on a shelf, to know that you could do something with it, but not become one with it.
Yes, precisely. You get it. You get it? I finally may have explained somewhat of the ineffable.
The ineffable. And what a beautiful word as well. Do you struggle with that, though? The idea of something being ineffable? You're a communicator.
Oh, every time it has been for 1982, it's been for 40 years. Every time I try to describe what we call in theology the ontology of God, which ontology is a word that means essence, that means the very nature, the very core of God. When I try to talk about the ontology of God, I walk away deflated, knowing I totally failed. Because if I have a God that is so little that I can understand this entity, then it is not big enough for me to worship. So I have to accept some things that I cannot understand. Yet there comes a time that's essential, and that's what I'm struggling with in writing right now. I feel the American church, especially, well, it happens on the Roman Catholic as well as the evangelical side, as well as the conservative side, have this histrionic Jesus. We're trying to, prove his miracles and prove the resurrection and prove salvation. Those are unproven things.
One must simply believe.
You must simply believe, and it's not in believing blindly, but knowing in your interior self. Because, like me, once you see Jesus, once you see the beauty of this God-man, of this God-becoming man, we will probably get comments on this because I happen to believe you don't make a decision for Christ. Christ makes a decision for you. And that when Christ shows his face to you, there is no saying, oh, I think I'll accept it, I think I'll deny it. Once you see the divine, once you see the holy, once you see the Creator and the beauty and this magnificent compilation of love, there is no other answer to life. It is the full answer to life. And the beauty of it is it's complemented by science. Science doesn't disprove God. In my mind, science proves God. I'm an evolutionist, and I think that proves God. That doesn't disprove God. Take a God that created by fiat. He created the world in 7 days. It's like a painter painting a painting for 7 days. That's really cool. Great insight, great creativity. But what about one that plants a seed in some fish or something that learns how to walk and learns how to talk and learns how to climb? What if that's part of creation? Do you know how much how much more magnificent that is than fiat creation?
Being a master architect.
Yes, and that's the view I have of God.
I want to come back, Charlie, and ask you more questions about that, because I know you're writing one more book. We only have, I think, 1 or 2 more minutes. But how many books have you written now?
I have 2 published by publishers and 3 self-published books.
And 3 self-published. And you're working on your 4th self-published, or is this going to go through a publishing house?
I think I'm going to try to take it through a publish house. I think I'll probably take it, oddly enough, through a Catholic publisher, because I'll be talking about all Catholic mystics. So Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross.
What is the premise of the book? And you have a working title. And I don't know if you're ready to share that working title, but what is the quick premise of the book? Because I think it's a beautiful summary to what we just said, and I would love to come back and talk about your book next.
The working title today, which I'm fond of saying, never believe what I say tomorrow, because with data I could say something different tomorrow. Never believe today what I say, because if I get data, I'll change my mind tomorrow. I'm very open. And I'm talking about mingling with the medieval mystics. And they are not concerned about dogma. They're not concerned about precise theology, although the theology is very precise. They have one concern. And St. Peter writes in his first letter in the New Testament, he writes, God has granted to us everything we need for life and godliness. And then he writes this statement, Cara, he has given us permission to partake within the divine nature.
What does that mean to you?
Think about that. It means, as one monk explained to me one time, it's not literal, it's a metaphor, but we are invited in essence to become a fourth member of the Trinity, that we can have that kind of union with the holy, that kind of union with love and divinity. And that's what mysticism is all about. It's where St. Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 3, he writes that you may be filled up to all the fullness of God. That has nothing to do with dogma. That has nothing to do with believing or burping out the right statements and all the correct theological statements. That is extravagant relationship with the holy, with the divine.
And so much in line with so many of the terms I hear you say of love, of joy, of curiosity. Charlie, thank you so much for allowing me on your show today to ask all of these questions. I think I could sit here for another 4 hours and still not have all of my questions satiated. But I really appreciate the time here and getting to know you a little bit more.
Cara, you're brilliant. I think you just took over my show. Paul is just saying,
let's start another show together.
Let's do another show. Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate you and all you're doing, and and I have.
I'm your fan as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
So I will take back over the host thing and wrap the show up and tell everybody thank you so much for listening. Please write in and tell me, and I can pass on to Cara what a beautiful job she does. That she was incredible on the podcast. And that's it for today. So this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.